Mr. Ellison.
Thank you, Chairman King, for allowing me to testify today. Though the chairman and I sometimes do disagree, including on the aspects of this hearing, I appreciate his willingness to engage in this dialogue. Let me also thank the ranking member, Ranking Member Thompson, for his commitment to Homeland Security and civil rights for all. It's a challenge to protect both security and liberty, but Congressman Thompson seems to strike the right balance. I'd like to introduce Talat Hamdani, who is with us today. She's a brave mother of Mohammed Salman Hamdani, a first responder who died trying to rescue fellow Americans on 9/11. I'd like to make 3 points today, Mr. Chairman. First, violent extremism is a serious concern to all Americans and is the legitimate business of this committee. Second, this committee's approach to this particular subject, I believe, is contrary to the best of American values and threatens our security, or could potentially. Finally, we need increased understanding and engagement with the Muslim community in order to keep America safe. Let me elaborate on my first point. Understanding the roots of domestic terrorism is the legitimate business of the House Homeland Security Committee. I share the chairman's concern about violent extremism. I voted for the Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Prevention Act of 2007, authored by Representative Jane Harman. This bill was a common-sense approach to studying violent extremism in the United States. After gathering more feedback from the community, I expect to introduce a similar bill in the future. I recently made a presentation sponsored by the Center for American Progress called Strengthening American Security, Identifying, Preventing, and Responding to Domestic Terrorism. My presentation there addressed causes of violent extremism and solutions for prevention and intervention. The safety of our families and communities is at stake in our discussion today. We should apply the utmost professionalism to this issue, which leads me to my second point. We need to conduct a thorough, fair analysis and to do no harm. The approach of today's hearing, I fear, does not meet these standards. Today's hearing is entitled The Extent of Radicalization of the American Muslim Community and that community's response. It's true that specific individuals, including some who are Muslims, are violent extremists. However, these are individuals, not entire communities. Individuals like Anwar al-Awlaki, Faisal Shahzad, Nidal Hassan do not represent the Muslim community. When you assign their violent actions to the entire community, you assign collective blame to a whole group. This is the very heart of stereotyping and scapegoating. This is the heart of my testimony today. Ascribing evil acts of a few individuals to an entire community is wrong. It is ineffective, and it risks making our country less safe. Solutions to the scourge of domestic terrorism often emerge from individuals from within the Muslim community, a point I address later in my testimony. However, demanding a community response, as the title of the hearing suggests, asserts that the entire community bears responsibility for the violent acts of individuals. Targeting of the Muslim American community for the actions of a few is unjust. Actually, all of us, all communities, are responsible for combating violent extremism. Singling out one community focuses our analysis in the wrong direction. Throughout human history, individuals from all communities and faiths have used religion and political ideology to justify violence. Let's just think about the KKK, America's oldest terrorist organization. The Oklahoma City bombing, the shooting at the Holocaust Museum by James von Braun, and bombings at Planned Parenthood clinics. Did Congress focus on the ethnic group or religion of these agents of violence as a matter of public policy? The answer is no. Stoking fears about an entire group for political agenda is not new in American history. During World War II, the United States government interned the Japanese Americans and spied on German Americans. During John F. Kennedy's presidential campaign, his opponents portrayed a dire future for an America with a Catholic president. We now view these events of our past as a breach of our treasured American values. Let's talk about facts rather than stereotypes. In fact, the Muslim American community rejects violent ideology. The RAND Corporation, a highly respected research organization, released a report last year that states the following, quote, given the low rate of would-be violent extremists, about 100 amongst an estimated 3 million American Muslims, suggests that the American Muslim population remains hostile to jihadist ideology and its exhortations to violence. At a Justice Department press conference just yesterday, Attorney General Eric Holder said, quote, the Muslim community has contributed significantly to the resolution of many things that have resolved over the course of the last 12 to 18 months. Tips have been received, information has been shared, has been critical to our effort to disrupt plots that otherwise might have occurred. Muslim American community across the country actively works with law enforcement officials, from dialogues with Attorney General Eric Holder to community meetings with local police in Minneapolis. Recently, tips from many Muslim American community foiled 2 domestic terror plots, including the case of the Times Square bomber and the Northern Virginia 5. Law enforcement officials depend upon those relationships. A recent report by the Muslim Public Affairs Council stated that information provided by Muslim Americans has helped to foil 7 domestic terror plots and 40% of all plots since 9/11. A 2011 study from Duke University Triangle Center on Terrorism reiterated that 40% of the domestic terror plots that have been prevented with the aid of Muslim American community. This cooperation with law enforcement is rooted in relationships and trust, relationships we should nurture. A witness at today's hearing, Los Angeles County Sheriff Lee Baca, testified before the House Homeland Security Subcommittee last year. He said, to effectively detect and manage extremists, police need to have trust and the understanding of the Muslim communities who live within and outside the United States. Simply, police need public participation. As leaders, we need to be rigorous about our analysis of violent extremism. Our responsibility includes doing no harm. I am concerned that the focus of today's hearing may increase suspicion of the Muslim American community, ultimately making us all a little less safe. We have seen the consequences of anti-Muslim sentiment, from backlash against Park 51 Muslim Community Center to the hostilities against the Islamic Center in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, to a threatened Quran burning in Gainesville, Florida. Zoning boards in communities like DuPage, Illinois, are denying permits to build mosques. At the height of the Park 51 controversy, a man asked a cabbie whether he was a Muslim. When the cabbie said, "Assalamu alaikum," which means peace be unto you, the individual stabbed him. Dennis McDonough, the president's deputy national security advisor, recently spoke at the Adams Center and at the All Dulles American Muslim Society. Mr. McDonough noted that Al-Qaeda Corps' recruiting argument is that the West is at war with Islam. A chief goal of our national security policy is to undermine this argument. This requires active engagement with Muslim community at home and throughout the world. As President Obama said in his Cairo speech, quote, Islam is not part of the problem in combating violent extremism. It is an important part of promoting peace. This brings me to my last point, and I will try to hurry, Mr. Chairman, because I see the time. Okay. The best defense against extreme ideologies is social inclusion and civic engagement. FBI agent Ralph Bolter, head of the Minneapolis FBI, illustrates my point. He led a large-scale probe into counterterrorism involving local Somali Americans heading overseas to fight with terrorist organizations. He's now coming to D.C. to become the agency's deputy assistant director in charge of counterterrorism. Bolter's strategy: to fight extremism, the agency needs to establish sincere relationships within the community. Quote, we had to be able to show people that they could trust me, trust us, Bolter said of the local community. FBI agent Bolter, quote, showed a side to the FBI that people don't see, unquote, said Minneapolis Police Chief Tim Dolan. They needed that. They needed a little more to make their case, and it paid off because of the connections he made. People came forward. He became somebody that they were willing to go to, unquote. Unfortunately, I fear that this hearing may undermine our efforts in this direction. Recently, on a news program, it was stated, quote, How about the number of young Somali men who went to Somalia and the imams and leaders in Minneapolis Muslim community who refused to cooperate at all? They were denying for a long time that they had even left. This sweeping statement regarding the community I represent is inaccurate. Unfortunately, why weren't law enforcement from Minneapolis invited to testify before this committee about the effective counterterrorism work that is going on in Minneapolis today? I invite and would welcome such an invitation. In January, the Department of Homeland Security of the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties convened a youth summit with Somali American youth and law enforcement agencies in Minneapolis. The event attracted over 100 people, including U.S. Attorney, 3 Somali American police officers, myself, several law enforcement and security agencies. The meeting provided an opportunity for Somali youth groups to learn more about the various roles and responsibilities of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and to discuss community issues and concerns with government representatives. Meeting participants discussed ways in which Somali youth and government entities can improve communication. Muslim Americans have been part of the American scene since the nation's founding. A little-known fact is that Cedar Rapids, Iowa is home to one of the oldest mosques in America. The Muslim community is just like the rest of us. Muslims serve our nations as doctors, lawyers, teachers, business owners, cab drivers, and even members of Congress. Muslim Americans live in every community in America, and they are our neighbors. In short, they are us. Every American, including Muslim Americans, suffered on 9/11. 29 Muslims died at the World Trade Center. 3 Muslims died in hijacked airplanes, United Flight 175 and American Flight 11. Muslims stood with the rest of America united in grief and in a resolve to protect America. Along with Americans of all faiths, Muslim Americans rushed in to save and rescue victims of al-Qaeda's terrorism. Let me close with a true story, but remember that it's only one of many American stories that could be told. Mohammed Salman Hamdani was a 23-year-old paramedic, a New York City police cadet, and Muslim American. He was one of those brave first responders who tragically lost his life in 9/11 terrorist attacks almost a decade ago. As the New York Times eulogized, he wanted to be seen as an all-American kid. He wore number 79 on the high school football team at Bayside, Queens, where he lived. He was called Sal by his friends. He became a research assistant at the Rockefeller University and drove an ambulance part-time. One Christmas, he sang Handel's Messiah in Queens. He saw all of the Star Wars movies, and it's well known that his new Honda was the one that read with the Young Jedi license plates. Mr. Hamdani bravely sacrificed his life to try to help others on 9/11. After the tragedy, some people tried to smear his character solely because of his Islamic faith. Some people spread false rumors and speculated that he was in league with the attackers because he was a Muslim. But it was only when his remains were identified that these lies were exposed. Mohammed Salman Hamdani was a fellow American who gave his life for other Americans. His life should not be identified as just a member of an ethnic group or just a member of a religion, but as an American who gave everything for his fellow Americans. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman for his testimony.
Mr. Chairman.